After the surrender of the Wehrmacht and German troops, zones controlled by Allied forces were established on German territory. The capital of the former Reich turned out to be in the Soviet zone. However, according to agreements dated September 12, 1944, between the USSR and the Allies, Berlin was divided into two approximately equal parts, Eastern and Western. East Berlin remained in the hands of the USSR and a limited contingent of Allied forces. Great Britain and the United States was stationed in West Berlin. On June 5, 1945, Britain allocated part of the city's territory from its occupation zone for a contingent from France. Thus, since June 1945, control over the western part of the city was exercised by the Allies, the USA, Great Britain, and France. Immediately after the war, two Berlins were formed: East, which became the capital of the GDR in 1949, and West, which remained under the control of the Allied powers. The Soviet side of Berlin. After the end of the war, the city lay in ruins. Many houses were destroyed, others were damaged. The infrastructure, logistics of the city, electricity, water, and gas supplies were disrupted. The threat of epidemics and famine hung over the city. The German population hid and was afraid to go outside. This was also the result of years of Goebbels' propaganda, which portrayed the Red Army soldiers as Eastern barbarian savages. The leadership of the Soviet troops, led by Marshal Zhukov, made great efforts to solve the seemingly insoluble problems of many German cities, including Berlin. Brigades of Red Army units and the local population were organized to clean and clear the city streets. By special order, field hospitals were deployed to provide medical care to the local population. Field kitchens operated in public squares and streets to organize meals and distribute bread to starving citizens. But in addition to general provisions and social relations, there were also intimate ones. People remain people everywhere. In the Reich, as we know, legal prostitution was organized to satisfy the intimate needs of the German army and related services. With the arrival of the Red Army, the brothels were closed, and their participants were sent home. However, this did not end the sale of love. On January 19, 1945, Headquarters Order No. 299 was issued strictly punishing violence and prohibited Soviet soldiers and officers from having sexual relations with German women and women from liberated countries. This, of course, was done not only because of moral considerations, although great attention was paid to the moral character of soldiers and officers in the Red Army. The Soviet leadership was also concerned about the spread of infectious and venereal diseases in the ranks of the army. And the fears were not in vain, since in post-war Europe, tuberculosis, scurvy, hepatitis, jaundice, as it was then called, and a whole bunch of venereal diseases in the form of syphilis, gonorrhea, trichomoniasis, etc. were widespread. However, despite all efforts, no government, of course, was able to truly stop sexual relations with German women. A great role to prevent this was given to agitation. Here's an example of one of the leaflets distributed by political departments among soldiers and officers of the Red Army shortly before the end of the war. Comrades, soldiers, German women are seducing you. Among them are also those German women who were specially left by the enemies in order to spread venereal diseases and thereby incapacitate the soldiers. How will you appear to your loved ones if you bring them a contagious disease? It should be noted that such agitation, combined with punitive measures, influenced the soldiers. However, it was impossible to prevent all close relationships between the German women and servicemen who were hungry for female affection. On the other hand, German women themselves were often willing to pay with their bodies just for food. Meat, sugar or bread, and basically any food for women in German villages and towns was a matter of survival. The writer Vladimir Gelfand recalled, "The mother of the girl I was courting was pleased with the gentleman. No wonder it was so, since on the altar of trust of her relatives, I brought sweets and butter, sausages, canned food, and expensive German cigarettes." Some servicemen during their stay in Germany became so close to German girls that in fact they lived like husband and wife. As a result, many German women became pregnant. However, their Russian so-called husbands could not take their German wives to the USSR. Soviet laws did not recognize such relationships. German women, even those who were pregnant or had given birth to soldiers and officers of the Red Army, were not allowed into the Soviet Union. Western sector of Berlin. In the western sector of Berlin, where there were Americans, British and French, the situation with intimate relationships was largely similar. Because of the famine in West Berlin, military personnel from the US, British and French armies often paid girls they liked with food and other things. There was also violence. Rapists, of course, were punished. The British edition of the York Review of October 25, 1945 wrote, "Street young girls openly offer themselves for food and lodging. It's very simple. They only have one thing left for sale, and they sell it." In the first post-war years, for many German women, it was a matter of survival. Australian war correspondent Osmar White wrote in his diary at the end of May 1945, "The smell of sewage and corpses was in the air. The facade of Femina, night cabaret, was covered with futuristic nude pictures and advertisements in 4 languages. The dance hall and restaurant were filled with Russian, British and American officers accompanying the women. A bottle of wine cost $25, a horse meat and chips hamburger cost $10, and a pack of American cigarettes cost a mind-blowing $20. Berlin women's cheeks were rouged and their lips painted. Many women wore silk stockings. The lady hostess of the evening opened the concert in German, English, French and Russian. This provoked sarcasm from the Russian artillery captain who was sitting next to me. He leaned towards me and said in decent English, 'Such a quick transition from national to international.'" Meanwhile, Dr. Stewart, in a medical report to General Eisenhower, reported that in 6 months the level of sexually transmitted diseases had increased significantly. One Berlin laundrywoman, according to the memoirs of the above-mentioned Osmar White, spoke about the intimate relationships of German women with soldiers. "The girls will very soon drag your soldiers into bed and make them forget about any orders. You will see for yourself." So, all the talk about some kind of violence against German women by the Red Army, Americans, British or French armies is clearly exaggerated, and in our time is actively spreading apparently on purpose. It would be more correct to say that it was the necessity of life that forced German women to behave this way, and it will be true.